History will probably remember him as the forever in waiting Prime Minister. Or perhaps history will remember him as the man who had to face trial for his role in the 1992 demolition of Babri Masjid. The outcome of that is still in the future. On 19th of April 2017, the Supreme Court gave a verdict restoring the criminal conspiracy charge against senior BJP leaders in the Babri Mosque demolition case. This theoretically ensures that our person of interest this week, LK Advani, cannot be the next President of India.
I think he had an enormous role to play in mainstreaming the Jan Sangh, the BJP, and thereby the Hindu right in the politics of this country. I call him often the ideological mascot of the earlier BJP, and in that sense he had a very important role to play in the rise of the BJP.
Among politicians in the country, you cannot doubt, ever doubt his devotion to the country's interest.
In 1990, Advani flagged off on a Rath for the first time to drum up support for a Ram temple in Ayodhya. The Yatra set off a massive public response and left a trail of communal tension in its wake, making it one of the biggest mass connect programs the country had ever witnessed. It was also Advani's only hit roadshow, the success of which he kept trying to recreate, unfortunately with diminishing returns each time. Yet the issue of the Ram Mandir remained a political landmine for almost a decade, changing the communal history of India, dividing it emotionally, engulfing the country in a series of riots, redefining the word secular for the country. It has been 25 years since that contentious structure was demolished, and while some question the timing, the apex court order is being seen by all as a huge setback for the leader whose name was also doing the rounds for the post of the president, Lal Krishna Advani.
Why the CBI has come to this view and taken this view in the Supreme Court is certainly a matter which journalists should inquire into, because the CBI is obviously even more a caged parrot now than it used to be in the UPA. But the judges cannot be faulted for taking the political things or anything. They say yes, there are a set of accused. There is not much difference. To expedite the trial, you must do this. And now the charge of conspiracy requires very specific type of proof. So we will all have to see what kind of proof the CBI is able to furnish in the case of conspiracy.
LK Advani is now really in the winter of his politics and life. He's in his late 80s, and as a result, this order of the Supreme Court will have limited impact on his political ambitions.
With a career spanning over 6 decades, BJP's Loh Purush was born on 8th of November 1927 in Karachi. After early schooling in Karachi, Advani moved to Bombay to continue his studies at the Government Law College. But politics beckoned. He had already joined the RSS in 1942, even before he moved to Bombay. In the 1950s, Lal Krishna Advani was an active and dedicated RSS pracharak in Rajasthan. So when in 1965 the Sangh's political aspirations came to the fore with the formation of the Bharatiya Jansangh, it was no surprise that Advani got anointed as the Rajasthan State Joint Secretary for the party. In less than a decade of joining, he was heading the Bharatiya Jansangh as its president in 1973. But it was the emergency that would propel Advani to limelight. It was when LK Advani was picked up in a midnight raid on opposition leaders of all hues and colours that he hit the headlines. Along with iconic leaders like Jayaprakash Narayan, Morarji Desai and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, it was also Advani who got thrown into jail under the draconian MISA, the Maintenance of Internal Security Act that Indira Gandhi used to clamp down on her political opponents. From being a journalist to being the president of Janasangh to being seen as another David versus the Goliath of Indira Gandhi, the name of Advani spread beyond the restrictions of right-wing belief. When emergency was lifted and elections held, a united opposition ensured that the newly formed Janata Party and its allies won power at the centre. The Janasangh merged into the Janata Party, and in Morarji Desai's government, the freshly out of jail Advani became a cabinet minister for the first time, in charge of information and broadcasting. Later, when the Janata Party sank under its own contradictions, the RSS-backed, formerly Janasangh, Hindutva-minded faction broke away in 1980 to form a new party. LK Advani, along with Atal Bihari Vajpayee, became the twin pillars around whom the Bharatiya Janata Party would weave its dream of one day gaining the confidence of the people to rule over India.
You know, Advani and Vajpayee is a strange relationship. It's a relationship between two people who temperamentally are very different. Advani, the family man, the more introspective, the more cerebral in many ways, and Vajpayee, the bon vivant, the someone who would be out there with his poetry, with his oratory, a man who easily made friends, had very few enemies, was a bachelor so you had two very contrasting personalities, and yet I think almost like Jai and Viru in Sholay, they were able to find a certain chemistry. So even if there may have been some level of rivalry at some stage, they never really allowed it to affect their contribution to the party.
As I feel that contrary to his public image, there are two things that have always struck me, and I've sort of in a small way remonstrated with him about those two things. One is that he is too trusting, almost innocently trusting, and this was different from Mr. Vajpayee, who had a natural skepticism. If you told him something, he will think कि क्यों कह रहा है, अब क्यों कह रहा है, अगर मैं इसका उल्टा करूं तो क्यों नहीं ठीक होगा. Advani ji would probably trust too much in the information he was given or the point of view which was expressed. And the problem always is that he is so articulate and so precise that that point of view would then get articulated in a much better way, in a way in which it was difficult to deal with.
The initial days were one of struggle. Advani and Vajpayee were the only two seats that they won in Parliament in 1984. But then 6 years later, Advani rode his wrath over the political landscape that was India, unleashing passions and divides that would challenge the apparently secular narrative that the Republic had chosen for itself. When Advani had let the genie of Hindu majority out of the bottle, he had also aptly positioned the BJP to reap the electoral benefits that followed the renewed polarization of society.
I did not know him at that time. I most certainly supported the Rath Yatra because I felt that at that time that corrective to what had become of secularism was required. Because at that time the state had bent to terrorists, for instance in Punjab in the 80s. And then it had bent on matters like Rushdie's book or the Shah Bano case to the other side. So it was necessary to restore the balance. And here was a movement which was going to really make the country think as to what true secularism would mean, true impartiality of the state towards religions. Today, for instance, it is the opposite, that in the name of Hinduism there is so much assertiveness and aggression and violence that it is, if today the Rath Yatra would be there, I would certainly oppose it.
If there is one march in the annals of independent India that marks the end of an epoch and the beginning of another, it is the Rath Yatra led by Lal Krishna Advani in 1990. Advani, also called the Iron Man of the BJP, changed the face of the party and introduced the concept of hardline Hindutva as the core political ideology of the BJP. And the Rath Yatra that he began on 25th of September 1990 cemented his reputation as a Hindu hardliner.
They would throw coins, and we would keep on appealing from the loudspeaker, from the radio, that not a single coin is to be thrown. But that would not deter them.
I don't think Advani ji, when he embarked on the Rath Yatra, was quite aware of what a tectonic change it would make in Indian politics. He had been pushing this idea of secular versus pseudo-secular politics after the Shah Banu verdict in the mid-1980s. And I think he saw the Rath Yatra as part of that political debate and discourse which was going on in the country. Whether he thought that would result in a mass movement, I'm not so sure. But I think halfway through the Rath Yatra, he knew he was onto something. And you could see, as the swell of crowds around him seemed to galvanize him, that he was relishing the moment. I don't think he necessarily conspired in the demolition of the Babri Masjid, but I would certainly say that his Rath Yatra had a major role to play in the kind of polarized politics that eventually resulted in the demolition of the Babri Masjid.
The then BJP President Advani flagged off on a modern-day chariot, a refurbished truck from the temple of Somnath in Gujarat. His route was deftly mapped to crisscross across 9 states before reaching Ayodhya. His stated motive? To drum up support for the Vishwa Hindu Parishad's call for Kar Seva on October 30th, to build a Ram Mandir where stood the Babri Masjid in Ayodhya. Though Advani's Rath was greeted by ecstatic Hindutva supporters across the country, the chariot also left a trail of communal backlash behind it. Little did anyone know that this Rath Yatra would eventually change the course of political discourse in India. In Delhi, the clamour was growing to bring about an immediate halt to the Rath Yatra, a decision that was fraught with danger for the stability of VP Singh's government. But the growing sentiment was that the Yatra was fomenting communal hatred by pitting Hindus against Muslims.
I have always said, मेरे भाषण में से एक कोई वाक्य निकाल दो जिसको कोई एंटी मुस्लिम कह सके, कोई दूसरे के खिलाफ कह सके, तो I would plead guilty.
On 23rd of October 1990, Advani was arrested at Samastipur just before his Rath was to cross over into UP. In Delhi, with the BJP having removed outside support, the VP Singh government lost its vote of confidence in Parliament and general elections were announced. The BJP, wanting to cash in on the belligerent Hindu sentiments that the Rath Yatra had unleashed, mounted a shrill campaign centered around the Ram Mandir issue.
बहुत बड़ी मात्रा में, बहुत बड़ी संख्या में ये लोग कहते हैं कि आप हिंदू वोट बैंक बना रहे हैं। मैंने कहा मैं हिंदू वोट बैंक नहीं बना रहा हूं, मैं पेट्रियोटिक वोट बैंक बना रहा हूं, मैं नेशनलिस्ट वोट बैंक।
The BJP's support base surged in the 1991 elections. Its seat share in the Lok Sabha increased from 85 to 120 in just 2 years. In the Uttar Pradesh Legislative Assembly, the BJP won big, adding 164 seats to bring up their total to 221, a figure that meant absolute majority in the assembly of 425. Yet, once the Babri Masjid was demolished by the forces unleashed by Advani's Rath Yatra on December 6, 1992, the surge dipped. BJP lost all 4 states in North India where it had a state government. However, in the long run, the Rath Yatra catapulted the party into power by 1998, making its hero Lal Krishna Advani the Deputy Prime Minister of India.
Those who lead movements seldom get to a consensual position.
In 1995, there was the BJP National Convention in Mumbai, and Advani ji was at the height of his powers within the BJP because it was the afterglow of the Rath Yatra. And yet he himself said Vajpayee ji will be our prime ministerial choice.
The BJP-led government of 1998, with Atal Bihari Vajpayee as Prime Minister, survived a mere 13 months when Jayalalitha pulled the rug from underneath their feet. Having lost the support of the AIADMK, the NDA failed to prove majority and fresh elections were called. Six months later, the NDA was back to power and with bigger numbers and support. Vajpayee was again Prime Minister and LK Advani was the Home Minister and later the Deputy Prime Minister of India, the closest he ever got to winning for himself the coveted post of the leader of the government. Halfway through its term, the NDA government started to look shaky and threatening to collapse under the weight of its internal conflicts. A string of electoral defeats in various states, along with the 2002 Gujarat riots, appeared to put enormous strain on the stability of the NDA government.
Narendra Modi owes a huge debt to LK Advani. Mr. Modi, in my view, would not be where he is today but for the support that LK Advani provided him first in the early 90s and then in 2002. I still remember that meeting in Goa where I was even told by someone close to Mr. Vajpayee that they had made up their mind that Mr. Modi would have to quit as Chief Minister. And then an hour later the decision was changed, largely because Advani ji insisted that Mr. Modi be given a chance to continue.
There's a very essential personal point also, I think, that in which there is a difference between Mr. Advani and Mr. Modi. Both grew up, as you said, as pracharaks. But Mr. Advani is a very widely read man. And therefore, what he might have internalized during his growing up years from the RSS is not his only reference point. Mr. Modi, by contrast, if from the small things that I might have observed, is not a well-read man. He has internalized the myths or mythologies or propositions, unexamined propositions, which would be the atmosphere in an RSS shakha or meeting or discourse. But he genuinely believes that we had this Ganesh's head was put on and there's plastic surgery, or we had stem cell therapies because so and so was conceived outside somebody's womb. These are not things given to him by a speechwriter. He believes this. I don't think Advaniji would believe anything like that.
As elections approached in 2004, Advani, as the driving force for the BJP, was supremely confident and conducted an aggressive campaign. He claimed the main opposition Congress party would not get even 100 seats in the Lok Sabha. But the reality was different. It was the BJP that suffered a defeat. It was Advani who was forced to sit in as the leader of the opposition, as Vajpayee, having taken moral responsibility for the defeat, relinquished his position to the man who had been his deputy prime minister.
My own view is that in 2004, we were overconfident. That's my view.
In 2005, while on a visit to Pakistan, LK Advani, whose brand of politics was hardline Hindutva and whose views on terrorism in Pakistan were uncompromising, suddenly spoke out in praise of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and all hell seemed to break loose back home. Despite the controversy it created within the BJP and the RSS, Advani refused to apologize for his statement. But on his return, he was forced to relinquish his position as BJP president, a resignation that he withdrew a few days later.
I think that remark was completely misrepresented by persons who wanted to get at Advani. In quoting that passage, I believe Advaniji was holding a mirror to what Pakistan had become. Please see, this is what you were to be. This is what you have become. And see the cost you have had to pay. So that formulation of actually Jinnah himself is as Mr. Jaswant Singh wrote in his book on Jinnah, is a much misunderstood, much misrepresented person in India.
In December 2005, Advani finally stepped down from his third stint as party president, paving the way for Rajnath Singh, a relatively junior politician from Uttar Pradesh, to take over the reins of the party.
It wasn't as if he wanted to step down as party president, it's just that he had been left with very few options. So, and he was hoping perhaps that his resignation would lead to some kind of a revolt from within, and many of his old comrades within the party would join him. That didn't happen. He was increasingly isolated. And that's where really his decline was scripted. And even if he became the BJP's prime ministerial candidate in 2009, it was quite simply a case of too little too late. I don't think the party was entirely convinced by then about LK Advani's politics any longer.
In 2013, Advani resigned from all party posts. This after his one-time protege Narendra Modi was appointed as the head of the electoral campaign of the BJP for the 2014 elections.
My sense, therefore, is that Advani and his supporters and his friends miscalculated that by 2013-14, LK Advani was an octogenarian and was the past of the BJP, and Narendra Modi was the future of the party. And sometimes mentors can't come to terms with the fact that maybe their proteges have moved ahead of them, or that the protege frankly has not really paid his Guru Dakshina in the way that he should. And maybe Mr. Modi could have handled it better, and maybe Mr. Advani could have been more graceful about it. But I think it will be a bitter chapter in LK Advani's life, that someone who he had mentored, whose political career he had saved, eventually ended scripting his obituary.
I do not know what he will do now, but I believe that as a person of such great seniority and as a person who cannot be disregarded by the BJP, he must speak up on the great issues of the day. We are not in a good condition. I believe that in many ways we are headed in a ruinous direction. For instance, in regard to Kashmir, every time somebody is beaten up or killed in the name of a cow here, there is a thunderclap in Kashmir. No one has that moral authority today to call a halt to this more than Advani ji. So I would sincerely hope that at some stage he will speak up and tell us, tell the country and thereby the BJP itself that they better get back to the straight road.
Close to 3 decades since LK Advani rode the Ramjanmabhoomi wave to drag the BJP from the fringes to the mainstream, the octogenarian's journey seems ironically headed towards ignominy.